Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. I want to start this week's show with the same words I used to start last week's show. The murder of Charlie Kirk was a despicable act. No matter what anyone may have thought about Charlie Kirk or the things he said, he had every right to say them. The First Amendment is designed to protect the rights of people to say things some may find deeply offensive. In fact, that's why it's there. You don't need the First Amendment to protect speech everyone agrees with, and you can't have a democracy if people are afraid to speak. That's what I said last week, and it's still true today. Unfortunately, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination and the understandable anger that rose from it, free speech is facing its greatest challenge in a very long time. Free speech is a hard concept for a lot of people to fully grasp. I can appreciate that. But you would hope the Attorney General wouldn't be one of them and that she would get it. This was the United States Attorney General Pam Bondi on Monday, appearing on the Katie Miller podcast.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
Let's be clear. Hate speech is still free speech. Charlie Kirk said many things that people considered hateful and disgusting, but he was free to say it. On Tuesday, a reporter from ABC News asked the president about Bondi's comments.
And what do you make of Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, I mean, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
We'd probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart.
That's the President of the United States saying perhaps his Justice Department should criminally prosecute that reporter. Why? Because Trump believes that reporter hates him. And if you think we shouldn't take comments like that seriously, the problem is the folks who work for Donald Trump do take him seriously. And that brings us to the suspension by ABC of Jimmy Kimmel. Now, there are those who do not see the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel as a free speech or First Amendment issue. They will argue that the First Amendment does not guarantee Jimmy Kimmel a late-night talk show any more than it guarantees me this show on Sunday morning. And they're absolutely right. In the case of Jimmy Kimmel, ABC can remove him the same way CBS can remove me if they want to. What the First Amendment does say, however, is that the government cannot use its vast powers to threaten or silence individuals. And yet here is Brendan Carr, the head of the Federal Communications Commission, threatening to go after the licenses of ABC stations that carry Jimmy Kimmel because of comments Kimmel made about the Charlie Kirk shooting.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Within hours of Carr making those threats, ABC announced they were suspending Jimmy Kimmel's show. Trump applauded the move and called on NBC to fire Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers as well. And while coming home from his trip to England, he suggested it was time for a wholesale purge of networks or stations who criticize him.
They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away.
We are seeing it in Florida as well. Ron DeSantis is threatening to fire teachers, nurses, and other government employees who post about Charlie Kirk on their personal media pages in a way the governor might find offensive. Many have already been suspended. That is the government using its power to decide what speech is acceptable and what isn't. So let me repeat something I said earlier. You can't have a democracy if people are afraid to speak. Now, this week I spoke to Democratic Congressman Max Frost about where we are heading, and I began by asking for his reaction to ABC suspending Jimmy Kimmel.
This is a very scary thing going on, and we got to take a step back. It's not just that ABC and Disney are bending the knee to an authoritarian and to this fascist government, but it's the fact that the FCC chair earlier that morning said, and I quote, They have to do this or else. That they have to punish Jimmy Kimmel or else. On comments that I really don't think were that bad comments. He condemned the violence. He was trying to make a point. But the problem here is we look throughout human history when fascist governments start going for artists and comedians, it's not because they're strong, but it's because they're weak. The other thing is people need to follow the money. And the Oversight Committee, we're going to have more to say on this soon, looking at a possible investigation. But let's look at the facts. Nexstar and Sinclair together were pushing forward this this bid to essentially have ABC can Jimmy Kimmel. Nexstar is trying to acquire their top competitor right now. They're trying to purchase their top competitor. And guess who has to approve that acquisition? The FCC. It's all connected to billionaires making more money, mega corporations making more money. This is a big red flag for us with the consolidation of media being owned by just a few different companies and a few billionaires that have no problem bending the knee to Donald Trump when someone says something, not that he just disagrees with, but when someone says something to criticize him. This is the foundation of this country, the First Amendment, the ability to criticize, to parody, to make fun of our politicians and our leaders. And whether
Well, let me jump in because I want to have this as a conversation as well, and I do want to return. I want to go back in a second to the question about the use of some language that you did in that and whether or not times have changed at all with regard to that. But I want to just stay on the point that you were just making right there. The point that you were just making, though, about the connecting the dots between what Brandon Carr said, that to me is where this crosses the line in terms of government interfering in this sort of way. I just want to be clear about that and have you expand a little bit more, because the First Amendment doesn't say everyone gets a late night talk show.
Exactly. The issue here isn't even necessarily Jimmy Kimmel himself. It's what happened before that, right? It's the fact that the government used its pressure and threatened the company, man, really all companies, to say, if you don't do what we want, we're going to revoke broadcasting licenses of your affiliates. And that's where it's against the First Amendment that says Congress should make no law infringing on speech. The government should not be interfering and trying to keep people from their speech. And that's exactly what happened. And again, you tie it all the way back to money. And this is part of the problem with fewer and fewer companies, corporations, and billionaires owning essentially all the media in this country. And we're going to be looking into that as well.
You described it earlier, and I do want to go back to it because I think there is a heightened state of urgency around these words that we often find ourselves using: authoritarian, fascist. There are those that will hear you use those types of words and say that that is the kind of speech that got Charlie Kirk shot, that got Charlie Kirk assassinated. When you start branding your enemies fascist or Nazis or authoritarian, then that becomes problematic, that those words can generate to violence. How do you respond, and why does it give you any pause, the Kirk assassination, in terms of the language that you're now using right now with us?
No, it doesn't. Number one, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm simply defining this administration. And I urge people to look at what an authoritarian is, what fascism is, look at what the Trump administration is doing, and ask themselves the question: do they believe that this administration, that this person is an authoritarian? This is the guy who, after he met with Putin and Putin told him, you got to get rid of the mail-in voting, what did he do? The next day, he does a press conference saying he's going to target mail-in voting, and even said that Putin's the one that told him that. So this is someone who likes to hang out with authoritarians. This is someone who has said during the campaign that he wants to be a dictator for one day. So I'm not here to be hyperbolic. Now, as it relates to the horrible tragedy of what happened to Charlie Kirk, I'll say two things. Number one, this was an extremist and a radical who had access to a gun and then did this horrible assassination and political assassination and gun violence of Charlie Kirk. What the problem is if we then say, well, we can't criticize people we disagree with because of that, in many cases, you have given a win to the extremists and the people who look to seek to use political violence to silence all of us. When we talk about toning down the rhetoric, what we're talking about is not engaging in talking about violence, not seeing violence as something that we need to do. I was one of the first people to go online right after I saw this shooting to say I completely condemned this shooting so people 100% know where I am, and to connect the dots to the fact that we have so much gun violence and rising political violence in this country. And it's not a problem of one side, even though most statistics show that most of it comes from the right. I'm not here to score political points. We need to condemn it on all sides, whether it's the left or the right. And so I'm going to continue to talk about what this administration is doing in very direct terms, but I'm going to always condemn political violence. I've always been committed to nonviolence. But if it's for someone to say me calling Trump an authoritarian is what led to the murder of Charlie Kirk, it's completely wrong and preposterous. And that's an example of trying to use a tragedy, a murder, and something that we all condemn to score political points, which I think is disgraceful.
Well, I think what they would say, in all fairness, is by calling Trump a authoritarian, by calling Trump a fascist, you give license to those who have tried to harm Donald Trump. Let's face it, there have been 2 assassination attempts, one that came very close to being successful against Donald Trump. And again, those who are engaging in that sort of violence may use the rhetoric that people calling him a Nazi or a fascist or an authoritarian as justification for their actions. Again, does that give you any pause at all in terms of what words you use?
I'm always cognizant of the words I'm using, and I do realize that I'm a political leader, but I will always call balls and strikes how they are, no matter, what jersey the team is wearing. And in the case of Donald Trump, he is someone who has worked with people who wrote Project 2025 are loud and proud fascists. What he is doing right now is authoritarianism. My mom came here from Cuba in the late 1960s, and part of the reason and part of the way that dictators and authoritarians get to power is when they silence dissent and people are too scared to say what's going on. So I completely object to that, and it's very personal to me.
Well, when we see it also in the larger context, which it gets so hard because it's like a fire hose of material that keeps coming towards us, when you put it in the context of going after universities, going after law firms, lawsuits against newspapers. Right now he's suing the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. The comments that Donald Trump made this week to a reporter from ABC News saying, perhaps you should be criminally investigated because you have hate in your heart towards me. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General's comments at the outset of the week. I think it's this broader issue that becomes so disturbing when you take it all into its totality.
Exactly. And when you look at all these different actions that the president's taken, not just the president, but his administration has taken, you can connect it directly to many of the authoritarians throughout history. And it would be a disservice of me as an elected official, but also as a member of the oppositional party in this moment, to not call that how it is so people understand what's going on, that this is not normal, that Donald Trump in many cases is blatantly breaking the law, that in part of the reason why the temperature is so amped up in this country and why political violence has gone up so much is because of him and because of where he's pushed this country over the last decade. And I feel it is important to talk about that. Now, I'll always condemn political violence. I've been fighting against gun violence since I was 15 years old. Okay, I've been to more than 60 vigils from 15 to 24 years old of dead people that I didn't even know. And so I'm a proponent of peace. But when we have a president who is weaponizing the government against the people, and he's doing it to people on the left, and he's doing it to people on the right. A lot of these conservative news outlets are scared to even, say any kind of criticism of him. It's not even about him protecting an ideology. It's about him protecting himself. We got to be honest about what's going on. It's really scary. And a lot of people who've come from authoritarian countries are saying, this looks very familiar. And so we have to talk about it, inspire people to get out to the ballot box so we can hopefully win in the midterms and be able to have a check on this administration.
When we come back, I'll talk to Miami businessman Richard Lamondin, who is running for Congress here in South Florida. Stay with us. Welcome back. There is a crowded Democratic field looking for the opportunity to take on Republican Congresswoman Elvira Salazar next year. A few weeks ago, we introduced you to Robin Peguera. This morning, we have another Democratic candidate, businessman Richard Lamondin. I started by asking him, why is he running?
I'm born and raised here in Miami. I built a company, EcoFi, with my brother. We started going door to door, changing out toilet showers and faucets to save people on water and help the environment. And we built it into a nationwide company that gets businesses to reduce carbon emissions, reduce water, and also reduce utility costs for renters. And at a time when the cost of living is incredibly high, that's become incredibly important. I'm running because I'm the father of a 3-year-old son, and I am deeply, deeply concerned for the future that he's going to inherit from us. We have a Miami that is becoming harder and harder to make it. We have a country that seems like it is ripping itself apart. If you look, I mean, the most recent news going on here in this country, we have schools that are regularly being shot at. We have a lot of members of our community, their families being ripped apart. And so I'm running because I'm tired of losing as a Democrat. And I also believe that my background as a business owner and as someone who has a Made in Miami story, that I can truly build the coalition to reach people and solve the practical problems that we need to solve here in Miami.
So let's get to probably the biggest obstacle that you very well may have is you're running in a congressional seat that is predominantly Hispanic, and whether or not you have the ability, I don't believe you're fluent in Spanish. You may speak a little bit of Spanish.
I speak fluent Spanish. I've done an interview also live on Telemundo. I speak fluent Spanish, yes.
You speak fluent Spanish. You'd be comfortable debating Salazar if she was willing to debate in Spanish.
Yes, I fully expect her never to be willing to debate, but yes, I could.
All right. Still, nevertheless, there is a trust factor that folks in that community may not view you as the most trustworthy of candidates as a result, because of that. And you have other candidates who are in the race. Tell me why that won't be an issue in your opinion.
Well, as I said before, look, I'm born and raised here in Miami. I speak Spanish because I am from this community and because out of the respect to the many people that I grew up with. I think the trust factor comes down to the fact that I am from here. I have dedicated my life here. I'm raising my family here. I've built my business here, and I have done it in the various parts of this community. Whether someone is Hispanic or not, I think is secondary to the fact that people want someone who can deliver. The last 2 Democratic candidates to run for this seat prior to me were both Hispanic, and they lost. The one who ran before that, Donna Shalala, was not Hispanic. And so I think that right now, ethnicity is far secondary to quality. And I think I bring a quality, and I think the fact that I have been successful in living the Miami dream, one that is slipping away from many, is something that resonates not just with the Democrats, but this is a Republican-leaning seat, but also the independents and Republicans that are needed to build a winning coalition.
So tell me what you see as the major issues in this race.
I think it all comes down right now to 2 things. One of them is opportunity and affordability. This is something that I'm sure you've heard plenty of candidates talk about, but very few of them actually live that in their daily life. I mean, some of them may sound poll tested, but my day job is to reduce water and energy bills for people in this country. That is how we make an impact. And so I believe that right now, my generation in particular, I am 38 years old. It is incredibly difficult to start a family, buy a home, rent is going up. I have a 3-year-old son. There is no public preschool, and I have to send him to preschool, which costs an additional rent. Right now, Jim, I know maybe you're out of this range, but preschool will run you anywhere from about $1,000 to $2,000, depending on where you are for school. That's out of reach for a lot of people. In addition to that, our schools, and the Congresswoman has been a big part of this, have been defunded. Healthcare is being stripped away from over 100,000 people in this district. And so this is something I think is top of mind. The second major issue is obviously the fact that this is a community of immigrants and families are being torn apart. You have a Congresswoman, Maria Elvira Salazar, that on the one hand points out correctly that Venezuela is a narco state, has a bloodthirsty dictator, and we've put a bounty on them that's larger than what we put on Osama bin Laden. But on the other hand, she is backing an administration that has told Venezuelans that their temporary protected status is over and they can go back now. Both of these things cannot be true at the same time. And so I think that right now, the hypocrisy of both Congresswoman Salazar and this administration is coming to the fore. It's the same issue with Nicaraguans, Cubans, Haitians in this community. And so I think that right now this district is tired of failed leadership and is ready for a new leader that can focus on the practical solutions that move us.
Let me jump in, and she would argue that she is trying to offer a solution on the immigration issue, that her Dignity Act is one that she thinks is gaining some traction, has a number of sponsors, co-sponsors on both the right and the left, and that she is trying to offer a pathway to bring some sanity back to the immigration debate.
Well, I would say that she is a master of political theater. She's tried to pass that bill twice already. It has never made it out of committee. In fact, in her 5 years in Congress, she has only written and passed one bill about wading birds. She's co-sponsored other, which is basically signing your name, but she's passed one bill in 5 years in Congress. This is a congresswoman who has not been effective for this community, and the Dignity Act is just a way for her to try to cover from the fact that she has not fought when she had the opportunity, when the budget bill passed by one vote, to actually hold up the process to deliver. I mean, her hypocrisy goes back further. On your very program, she went on and was asked by you why she's going to ribbon cuttings for infrastructure projects that she voted against. And she melted when you asked that question because she cannot take the difficult questions. That's why I've been working in the community. We hosted a town hall 2 days ago, which was a packed house of people wanting to ask the Congresswoman questions, but she didn't want her to do her job. And so I did. And I think that people appreciate a leader that actually shows up.
You said earlier that this is a district that leans Republican. I know that the voter registration rolls more sharply favor Republicans. I looked at the numbers recently, and the gap between Democrats and Republicans is growing fairly dramatically. How do you overcome that? How do you just overcome any of the basic structural problems with a district that leans now so heavily towards the Republicans?
Well, I think one of the things that has been unfortunate is that magically, when the recent voter rolls were updated, Democrats and independents lost far more voters than Republicans.
Well, let me just stop you there. When you say magically, you seem to be inferring that something improper happened. Do you have any evidence that there was anything improper by the supervisor of elections in removing Democrats?
I have no evidence. I just wonder why it was so disproportional. So that's a question for journalists, but that is something that was curious. That's all I'll point out. So this district, I think, is less Republican than tired. This is a district that has been led by someone who has not had their best interests at heart. We talk about the fact that she is not offering practical solutions to our problem. She is not in the community actually listening to the issues that people are facing. There were dozens of issues at the town hall that I held, and these are ones that she could have material difference on. When you reach out to her office, you get an automated, we hear you, we see you, and we'll get back to you, and you never get back to it. Should they never get back to you? This is a leader that is continuing to fail us. And I strongly believe that in this time, people are realizing that it's time for a new change. And that is why I'm running. And I believe very strongly, and the polling supports that, by the way. There's a recent poll by Kaplan Research, I believe, that had her stuck at 45% support when she won the last election with 60% of the vote. And so this is a time in this era where people are looking for something new and someone who can deliver, and I can do that for this district.
We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.